Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. President Donald Trump is set to host Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for a bilateral meeting and state dinner at the White House today. A car rams into a crowd in Munich, Germany, injuring at least 15 people. The city is due to host Vice President J.D. Vance and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today. Indonesia and Turkey signed 13 deals to bolster trade, defense, and media cooperation, including the delivery of 69 Turkish combat drones to Jakarta. Uganda's opposition leader begins a hunger strike after being detained illegally and put on trial in a military tribunal. The country's Supreme Court has banned prosecuting civilians in military courts. And Japanese car makers Nissan and Honda officially call off their merger plans as talks collapse after Honda proposed making Nissan its subsidiary. We begin in Australia, where two nurses in a Sydney hospital have been fired after they threatened to kill Israeli patients and refuse to treat any Israelis that come in seeking help. The two nurses posted a video on TikTok with their message sparking outrage across the country, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called the incident sickening and has ordered the federal authorities to investigate the threats.
It's very clear to me that these people have committed what are crimes, and they should face the full force of the law.
Those people subject to that investigation will not ever be working for New South Wales Health again. They are vile, disgusting and deranged individuals.
The names of both nurses have now been released by the New South Wales Health Ministry. Ahmad Rashid Nadir is a migrant from Afghanistan who became an Australian citizen 4 years ago, while Sarah Abu Ladeh was reportedly born in the country to immigrant parents. In the TikTok video, the two nurses were seen calling Palestine a country while laughing and joking about how they would kill any Israeli patients. The Australian government has even issued an apology to the Jewish community in the country.
Community, today I say not only am I sorry, but I can assure you this: the care that you get in our hospitals will continue to be first class. We will investigate this uphill and down dale. We will not just be looking at this incident per se, but we will also be obviously going through previous cases to make sure that that hospital has been working in a way that reflects those values around safety and care.
Now, anti-Semitism and attacks on the Jewish community have been on the rise in Australia since the start of the Israel-Hamas war and the destruction of Gaza. And since November of last year, there have been at least 7 attacks on the homes and schools of Jews, including the usage of bombs and incendiary devices. Australian police say these attacks have been carried out by migrants of other countries, particularly from Islamic nations. And following the rise of anti-Semitism, Australia recently passed a strict law imposing hefty penalties and even jail time on criminals.
We're strengthening the legislation today. We want people who are engaged in anti-Semitic activities to be caught, to be charged, and to be put in the clink. That's my priority.
Meanwhile, the Australian police has promised to investigate the recent incident swiftly and prosecute the two nurses for their anti-Semitic behavior. However, the actions of the two nurses have shocked the entire medical community, who are otherwise known for their apolitical stance and have taken an oath to save lives regardless of a person's identity. And now moving to the Middle East, U.S. intelligence suggests that Israel is likely planning a strike on Iran's nuclear program in the coming months. The preemptive attack could set back Tehran's program by weeks or months, while certainly escalating tensions in the region. Now, according to the Washington Post, Israel is expected to hit Iran's Fordow and Natanz nuclear sites by mid-year. This after Israel bombarded Iran last October, weakening its air defenses and exposing it to further attacks. Now, the White House and the Israeli government have refused to comment on the intel report. However, a spokesperson for the U.S. National Security Council says President Donald Trump will not allow Iran to advance its nuclear program at any cost.
President Trump has made it clear he will not permit Iran to get a nuclear weapon. While he prefers negotiating a resolution to America's long-standing issues with the Iranian regime peacefully, he will not wait indefinitely if Iran isn't willing to deal, and soon.
The intel report mentions 2 strike options for Israel, both of which involve support from the United States. The first attack could be a distance assault, meaning Israel would fire long-range missiles from outside of the Iranian airspace. The second option could see Israeli jets entering Iran's airspace and dropping bunker-buster precision bombs on the nuclear sites. The revelation could prove to be an early test for President Donald Trump, who has until now campaigned for restoring peace with the Islamic regime while also expressing support for Israel.
I say this, and I say this to Iran, who's listening very intently. I would love to be able to make a great deal, a deal where you can get on with your lives and you'll do wonderfully. You'll do wonderfully. Incredible people, industrious, beautiful, just an unbelievable group of people in Iran. And I know them well, have many friends from Iran and many friends that are Americans from Iran, and they're very proud of Iran. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. I'm not putting restrictions. They cannot have one thing. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if I think that they will have a nuclear weapon, despite what I just said, I think that's going to be very unfortunate for them. If, on the other hand, they can convince us that they won't, and I hope they can, it's very easy to do. It's actually very easy to do. I think they're going to have an unbelievable future.
However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says sees Tehran as an imminent threat that could only be stopped with the help of President Donald Trump.
We also see eye to eye on Iran. That's the same Iran that tried to kill us both. They tried to kill you, Mr. President. They tried through their proxies to kill me. We're both committed to rolling back Iran's aggression in the region and ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon.
Now, only time will tell how U.S.-Iranian policy takes shape under President Donald Trump as he makes the difficult decision between potential peace and almost certain war. And now back in the United States, President Donald Trump held a telephone conversation with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Wednesday. Now, following the 90-minute phone call, President Trump promised that negotiations to end the war in Ukraine will begin immediately. The two leaders also discussed tensions in the Middle East, artificial intelligence, and dollarization, among other things. The Kremlin said Vladimir Putin has invited President Trump to visit Moscow and settle the Ukraine conflict face-to-face.
The Russian president invited the U.S. president to visit Moscow and expressed his readiness to receive U.S. officials in Russia in those areas of mutual interest, including, of course, the topic of Ukrainian settlement. Putin and Trump also agreed to continue personal contacts, including arranging a face-to-face meeting.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump said he will likely meet Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia, where the Crown Prince could mediate the conversation.
Dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia. The first time we'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done. But we want to end that war. That war is a disaster. It's a really bloody, horrible war.
Now, shortly after getting off the phone call with the Russian leader, President Trump also spoke with Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed.
Now, when asked about whether he's freezing out Ukraine from the peace process, President Trump said he only wants to stop the deadly war.
Helps President Zelensky of this process a bit? Isn't there a danger of that?
No, I don't think so, as long as he's there. But, at some point you're going to have elections, too. You're going to have an election.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
The president also reiterated that Russia would never allow Ukraine to join the NATO alliance, and he has no problem with that.
It's practical to have it, personally. I know that our new Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is something that's not going to happen.
Now, Donald Trump's conciliatory tone towards Putin comes after 3 years of silence between former President Joe Biden and the Russian president. In fact, President Trump has maintained an approach contrary to his predecessor, signaling his desire to resolve the conflict through dialogue, something that Kyiv agrees with as well. With Trump back in the White House, Russia has already gotten what it wants, a chance to negotiate directly with the United States with minimum interference from Ukraine. Now, only time will tell how much Putin is prepared to compromise, if at all, and how much Ukraine is actually ready to lose as President Donald Trump navigates a possible ceasefire. And staying with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin is waging a secret war, not with tanks, bombs, or bullets, but with people. According to NATO, Russia and its allies, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, are in fact weaponizing migration, flooding the southern U.S. border. And this is no accident. NATO generals say it is a calculated strategy meant to destabilize the United States. So just how far does Russia's influence in Latin America actually go? The answers may actually shock you. Our next report uncovers the full story.
In the shadows of global politics, a secret war unfolds. It is not fought with tanks or missiles, but with people, desperate people. And Russia, through its allies, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, has turned migration into a weapon. This strategy, first used in Europe, now floods the US border with illegal immigrants. It began in 2014 after Russia annexed Crimea.
We hold you as an example, our dear veterans, and there is a big moral input on your side in that. Sevastopol and Crimea are back to Russia. You transferred to us the great values of unity, fairness, solidarity. You taught us to act according to our conscience. The generation that grew up in Sevastopol has always acted according to those values.
The Kremlin acted, and they knew they needed to weaken Europe's response to sanctions. So it unleashed a wave of migrants through its eastern route. NATO's then General Philip Breedlove warned that Russia and Syria's Assad regime were weaponizing migration. Their plan was clear: overwhelm Europe, break its resolve, and force negotiations. Then 2 years later, in 2016, Russia targeted Finland. The Center for Eastern Studies revealed that the FSB, which is Russia's security agency, directed migrants to the Finnish border. And a Russian border guard even confirmed it. The FSB decides which car moves and when. Families with children were given priority, and Russia controls the flow.
Many people are disappointed by Europe. And to be perfectly honest, so am I a little, although I continue to work optimistically. But I believe there is a need for greater understanding that all countries will face difficulties if we reintroduce border controls everywhere. All countries must have an interest in the protection of the outer border, because if we don't have that, then we are also in great danger in terms of security policy.
Then came 2022, and history repeated itself. This time, Belarus joined the game. The country increased flights from Syria and Iraq, and Syrian airline Cham Wings launched daily flights to Minsk. Migrants arrived, but hardly anyone left. Flights from Baghdad to Minsk carried 180 people, while only 5 returned.
This is horrible. In total, this is all orchestrated by the Belarusian regime. The migrants are lied to being brought there, so that Lukashenko and his villains can sort out their problems. As the migrants were lied to and robbed, their presence at the border becomes the hot spot in our region. This is all the fault of Lukashenko and Putin.
Soon after which, Poland, Lithuania and Latvia declared states of emergency. Finland shut its border, realizing Russian guards were helping illegal crossings. Now this same playbook is being used in America's backyard. Russia's allies, Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela, are engineering a crisis at the southern US border. Illegal migrants from these countries once made up less than 1% of the crossings, and now they account for 20%. But why the sudden surge? Because the ruling elites and cartels are making it easier for migrants to leave. For instance, in Cuba, a growing Russian military base signals deeper ties. And after thousands of Cuban mercenaries were sent to fight for Russia and Ukraine, it is certain the crisis is deeper than what one might think. And in all of this, Nicaragua plays a key role. In October 2022, it was one of only 4 countries that voted against condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And the others were North Korea, Syria and Belarus, Moscow's loyal puppets. And soon after, Nicaragua opened its airports to charter flights filled with Cubans. On arrival, they were met by Mexican smugglers or coyotes ready to guide them north. Even though the US eventually sanctioned those airlines, but the damage was done. Venezuela followed suit, and soon over 266,000 migrants crossed the US border, becoming the largest group crossing illegally. The Colombian migrants were also not far behind. In the same year, at least 160,000 crossed the border illegally. Even Haiti wasn't spared. At least 76,000 Haitians accounted for illegal arrivals at the US border. The evidence is clear. Russia and its allies are destabilizing the West. They use migration as a tool, just as they did in Europe. They support cartels, build smuggling routes and flood borders at will. Western democracies must act fast, and if they don't, this hidden war will only grow.
And Pablo Escobar is gone, but his face still haunts Colombia. His ghost lingers not in the streets where his cartel once spilled blood, but on t-shirts, mugs, and keychains sold to curious tourists. To most, he is a criminal, but to some, Escobar is a legend. And now a new bill in Colombia's Congress aims to ban the drug lord's name from merchandise and rewrite the country's narrative. Colombia's fight isn't just about collectibles, but about memory, history, and who gets to tell the story. Our final report has more.
Pablo Escobar was once the world's most feared drug lord. He ruled with violence, corruption, and immense power. His cartel controlled 80% of the cocaine trade in the United States. And during that time, his name became synonymous with terror and bloodshed. But decades after his death, his image remains alive. His face is printed on t-shirts, mugs, and keychains, and his legacy is a booming business. Now, a proposed law in Colombia's Congress seeks change. The proposed bill would ban Escobar-themed merchandise entirely. It aims to stop the glorification of criminals like him, and selling, wearing, or carrying Escobar merch would become illegal. The violators could even face fines and business suspensions. Because the bill would add an article to Colombia's existing Citizen Security and Coexistence Code, where the fines will range from 173,000 Colombian peso, which is about $42, to 693,000 Colombian pesos, which is about $168, along with the destruction of the goods. While for many the bill is long overdue, for others the drug lord is a legend whose history will never fade. And in Medellin, which is Colombia's second largest city, profits from these sales are counted upon. Vendors here depend on Escobar's legacy to survive. Street vendors worry that if the proposed bill is put into action, how will they survive? How will they earn their livelihood?
This is terrible. We have a right to work, and these Pablo t-shirts especially always sell well. This Escobar merchandise benefits many families here. It sustains us. It helps us pay our rent, buy food, look after our kids.
But not everyone agrees. Several vendors find these sales unethical.
We need this ban. He did awful things, and these souvenirs are things that shouldn't exist.
And even congressmen share this view. Juan Sebastian Gomez, Congress member and co-author of the bill, says Escobar's image stigmatizes the country abroad, adding that difficult history shouldn't be reduced to a t-shirt. He declares that the bill proposes a transition period for sellers and that sellers would be allowed time to replace Escobar-themed products.
In Germany, you don't sell Hitler t-shirts or swastikas. In Italy, you don't sell Mussolini stickers. And you don't go to Chile and get a copy of Pinochet's ID card. I think the most important thing the bill can do is to generate a conversation as a country, a conversation that hasn't happened yet.
Now, even though Medellin's mayor supports the bill and calls Escobar merchandise an insult to victims, the bill still faces hurdles in Congress. It must pass 4 stages before becoming law. But for supporters of the bill, this isn't history. This is about rewriting the story, one where victims are remembered and where Escobar is no longer a souvenir.
That's First Post America for this Thursday. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks everyone for tuning in.